Imagine you're in the market for an EV. Are you doing that? Good. Now imagine you're in the market for a practical EV with plenty of space for things. Well, you could go for an SUV, but SUVs, they're everywhere. Or you could go for a wagon EV, but there aren't any of those. Or at least, there wasn't. Until the Taycan Cross Turismo rocked up.
Yes, at last there's an EV wagon. A lower and sleeker alternative to the myriad of SUVs that are flooding the roads. At a basic level, a Taycan Cross Turismo is an estate Taycan with a gravel mode and some extra ride height, which means you can accelerate so fast you'll pull a muscle in your neck, but also be able to bring your dog along for the ride.
Now we've only got a few hours with this car. It's left-hand drive and it's come all the way from Germany for people to try before the right-hand drive cars come off the boat in a few months' time. What I want to do is explore what makes this different to a regular Taycan. Is it more fun than an SUV? And I want to launch it in a straight line because it's a Taycan Turbo and you've just got to.
The most obvious change is, of course, the rear end. The dog-swallowing Cross Turismo is the same width as a regular Taycan, but 11mm longer and 31mm taller. The chassis is 4mm longer too, while the front track is 8mm wider and the rear track 5mm narrower. It's a seriously tasty looking machine, better in the metal than any picture seems to portray and perhaps even better looking than a regular Taycan. The penalty is 90 kilograms of extra weight, but there are benefits to that chunky behind.
Now I know we don't normally talk about boot space on GRR, but bear with me. Because if you're thinking of buying an EV SUV because you want more space over, let's say, a Taycan Saloon, then the Cross Turismo's boot is big, very big. Regular Taycan, 366 litres of space. Taycan Cross Turismo, 401 litres. Now it's quite difficult to illustrate how much space you have unless you've got something big to put in the boot. Now I don't have that because I'm in the middle of the countryside. What I do have is a Porsche pen. Now I want you to imagine that you're a pen salesman. You need to transport thousands of pens up and down the country. I'd be willing to bet you could fit millions of pens in that boot.
Like the regular Taycan, there's no engine, so there is a front trunk, but it's bigger in the Cross Turismo by a pen-munching 3 litres. And on the inside, whether you go for the 3-seat rear or the 2-seat rear, there's 47mm of extra headroom to be enjoyed. You know that favourite bobble hat you wear to Rally GB? You can wear that here. What else do you need to know? Well, the Taycan Cross Turismo has 3-chamber air springs, with electronic dampers fitted as standard. There are double wishbones up front and a multi-link rear. Every Cross Turismo rides 20mm higher than a standard Taycan, but go for the off-road design pack and you get an extra 10mm on top of that. All in all then, you can have a Taycan Cross Turismo that's 30mm taller than a regular Taycan. And if you happen to pass upon enough road course, there's a gravel mode to quickly raise the suspension to its highest setting. It's also all-wheel drive only, with one motor and a single-speed transmission at the front, and another motor and a 2-speed transmission in the rear. That means the range comprises of the Cross Turismo 4, 4S, Turbo and Turbo S. There is no rear-wheel drive only option here. The bigger battery comes as standard too, 83.7 kilowatt hours, which it does not on the lower level standard Taycans.
Which car is this? Well, it's not the full kick you in your kidneys Taycan Turbo S, it's a Taycan Turbo. I know, sigh, getting to 62 miles an hour and anything over 3 seconds is just such a drag, isn't it? No, it's still stupidly fast. That's obscenely quick. The Turbo has 625 horsepower and 850 newton meters of torque from an 83.7 kilowatt hour battery. The range is said to be between 245 and 280 miles, but in reality, I don't think you'll often hit that kind of number. I'm sure you could technically, but it's more the fact that well, you've bought the turbo, you've bought one of the quick ones, and it's very difficult not to just... You find yourself doing it when you just don't need to. So for that reason, I probably wouldn't get 245 miles of range. What's fun is that you get more power with an overboost function when you do a launch. So you get 680 horsepower rather than 625. 0 to 62 miles an hour, 3.3 seconds. The top speed, 155 miles an hour. To say it's violent would be a bit of an understatement, really. I'm in normal mode at the moment. If I put it into sport and then sport plus, if I come to a stop, put my left foot on the brake, right foot on the accelerator, launch control activated. It's rapid, really, really rapid. And it feels more violent than I was expecting. I think because when you get to around 40, 50 miles an hour, somewhere around there, you can feel at the rear axle it go from one gear to the next, and you get a little kick, you can feel it. I think it baffles me more than makes me uncomfortable, because how can a car that weighs 2,395 kilos, so that's 95 kilos less than a Rolls-Royce Ghost, accelerate with the same kind of punch as a 911 Turbo? It's bonkers.
And of course, with all of that mass, you need decent brakes. The Turbo gets ventilated 410mm cast iron tungsten carbide coated discs up front with 365mm discs at the rear. There are 6 and 4 piston calipers respectively. Those are all tucked up in Pirelli P0 tyres.
The brakes are very strong, and actually the brake pedal, you've got to put a lot more effort into the pedal than I was anticipating. You've really got to push down it to get maximum deceleration. What's good is that the pedal itself feels like a normal brake pedal. Sometimes when you get in an EV or a hybrid particularly, when you put your foot on the brake, you won't get the same response every time, or maybe you'll have a consistent pressure on the brake, but your deceleration rate will change. You'll feel it. It's an odd sensation. It doesn't inspire that much confidence. With this, actually, brake pedal is very, very good. When you put your foot on the brake, you get the response from the system that you're expecting. The steering is Porsche steering, and by that I mean it's accurate and very good. And there's so much grip, honestly, for a car that weighs this much. You've got to tell your brain, no, you can take this much speed into a corner, because you'll want to brake or lift off a little bit, but if you keep your nerve and you keep on the gas as you go through a corner, it just grips and grips and grips and grips. It's mighty impressive. As for the suspension, it's very smooth. In normal mode, it's quite comfortable. When you move into Sport and then Sport Plus particularly, it can be a little bit too choppy for some of our A and B roads, particularly B roads, where it's properly broken. You don't want it in Sport Plus, but whatever mode you're in though, there's not too much roll, it's controlled, it's what you'd expect from Porsche. One smart feature is that you can tell the car where speed bumps are, or where ramps are, where that horrible entrance to a multi-storey car park is. And every time you get to that point, the suspension will automatically go up, so you're less likely to scrape your nose. That's just clever, it's useful, it's everyday kind of usefulness. What I found as well is that because you've got that extra ride height, you start using this car slightly differently to, say, a regular Panamera or, a 911 or something. You start looking at bumps or ditches at the side of the road. Let's say there's a car coming towards you and you need to move over slightly. You just find yourself attacking the verge a little bit more. You feel confident that you're not going to scrape a nose or do some huge damage to the side of the car. It's actually quite handy, quite useful on tight country roads. That being said, on tight country roads, this car does feel quite big. It's quite wide. Now I'll admit, I've never really seen the point in regular cars with a few extra centimetres of ride height and some black plastic panels on the wheel arches, because I can never see why that would be useful in my life. So knowing that very soon there will be a Taycan Sport Turismo, that appeals to me more than Taycan Cross Turismo. However, this has surprised me because I've found actually it's quite enjoyable to have this kind of performance but some extra usability. And by usability, I don't mean I'm making the most of gravel mode all the time, because let's face it, how often am I going to drive on a beach or a rally stage? Not very often. But what I might do is have to pull off to the side of the road to get out of the way of a tractor coming in the opposite direction. I might have to park on something that's perhaps got a bit of a bumpy grass verge or some massive potholes or something. And in those kinds of situations, actually having that extra ride height, even though I've only been in this car for a few hours, is incredibly useful. And I didn't think it would be. That's what's got me. Just as a machine, this is so capable, so fast, so much grip, so much performance all of the time. It is a remarkable machine. It makes you less worried about an EV heavy future, because EVs, you realise when you drive something like this, they can be fun. If you're looking for an EV with extra space, don't get tunnel visioned into thinking that an SUV is the only way to go. Because a wagon, an estate car like a Taycan Cross Turismo, like a Sport Turismo, will get my vote every day of the week.